I'm Max Delabriere. I'm a junior at Yale from Alberta, Canada, but I went to boarding school in New Hampshire, and I'm a history major at Yale.
My name is Matt. I'm a junior at Yale from Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm studying philosophy.
I'm Evan Walker Wells. I'm from Brooklyn, New York, and I'm studying history as well.
I knew going in that I wanted a school in a city. I really wanted an academic environment that was stimulating, that was exciting. I looked at Yale, I sort of fell in love when I first saw it. I ended up applying early, which I think helped a lot. And it also helped me just know what was going on earlier than I would have normally. And since Yale's early action, it meant that I could apply and not necessarily be bound to it, even though I would know a little early about where I'd gotten in. So I looked at Yale, I looked at North Carolina, which was also a really exciting school, but I ended up falling in love with the sort of the Yale experience and how exciting it was.
Yeah, I was attracted to Yale because I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to study, and I realized that at Yale I would have the freedom to choose almost any program and have a strong, an academically strong experience in it. And so, when I visited Yale for the first time, it just seemed like a really great place. I loved the city, I loved the architecture, I loved the campus environment that I saw, and the sense of community that I could sort of feel there. But it was definitely a sort of academic decision that I made first and foremost.
For me, I was really looking for a school that had both a really exciting academics with people who were really passionate about what they were studying, a really kind of lively extracurricular life, where people were really doing things that they were excited by outside of classes, and really spent time and really cared about that. And also a place that was kind of fun to be at, where people were happy and kind of enjoyed being there and were very friendly, that had kind of an exciting social life. Between those kind of three things and looking for a school that was kind of big enough, that didn't feel too small, and looking for a school that had the kinds of academic opportunities I was looking for, Yale just made the most sense. And like Max and Matt, I kind of fell in love with it when I visited. I visited twice before deciding to go to Yale and had great times both times. So that was sort of how I knew it was for me.
My standardized testing career started with a PSAT, which I took a year early, and it's very similar to SAT, a little easier, and it helped me a lot. I did well on the writing and the reading sections. I didn't do as well on the math, and I knew going to SAT that I really wanted to look at how I was doing on math, what my problems were there, and how to how to improve. So I ended up taking SAT and doing surprisingly well, and only taking it once. Again, math is a little lower than everything else, but I could deal with that. So after SAT was done, it was it was pretty simple. I looked at the application, did a comment application, wrote my essay over the summer beforehand, so I really have time to work on it and to revise it and to make sure I was very happy with it. I did an interview back home in Canada and sent my application early. And once I got into Yale, I sort of decided that I was pretty much done. I only applied to North Carolina after that, which is a similar application. It was the Common App, and I didn't need another essay. So after the SAT and the essay, it was pretty simple.
Yeah, like Max, I started with the PSAT in my third year of high school, but my senior year I took both the SAT and the ACT. I took both of them once. I did significantly better on the SAT, and decided that I didn't need to retake it, and that I would only submit that score in my college application process. So that was sort of my testing experience senior year. In terms of essay writing, I actually honestly started the essays for my applications a little bit later than I should have, but still gave myself time to look through them, revise, and I based my essays I only applied to 2 or 3 schools, and so I had some common themes in my essays and didn't have to write completely new ones for the different schools.
I took the PSAT as the first time when I was a sophomore. My high school had all sophomores take it, even though normally juniors take it. So I took it sophomore year, then I took it junior year. And I'd actually taken the SATs when I was in 7th grade to apply for some summer program. And so when I was kind of going through that, sort of already knew what the test was like. I was used to the kind of structure and the whole thing, which made it a lot easier. But that said, I ended up taking the SATs twice. I took the SATs in the January of my junior year, and then the following October. I didn't get a very good writing score, I think, on my first SAT, so I took it again to improve the writing score, and one of the others went up as well, but I don't actually remember all that well.
My Common App essay was about, the summer before my last year of high school, I worked on a construction site back home in Canada, and at boarding school in New Hampshire, my best friend was gay, as they're involved in the Gay Straight Alliance. So I wrote my essay about the construction experience and how different attitudes there were towards gay people and the language there, and how I dealt with it going between the two. I think I also wrote an essay for one of my applications on my favorite piece of art. I wrote about a play that's my grandmother. It was sort of a very simple thing. And then finally there was a sort of a why Yale essay, but that was much less interesting.
Yeah, I was raised in an extremely religious environment, and for my college essays, I picked that as one of two themes for my writing, and so I talked about elements of my religious background and then elements of my sort of intellectual interests and the things that sort of had driven me academically through high school, and took those two themes and sort of wrote an essay describing them as, I suppose, interwoven like strands in my life that had like sort of been important for a lot of the things that I had done, and so I tried to sort of give a very it has to be a selective picture, but a picture of what had been sort of important in driving my choices through high school.
My essays were personal essays as well. They weren't about the things that I'd done so much as my thoughts and growing up and becoming me. I think the goal, like Max and Matt was saying, is sort of to give a sense of who you are and try to explain that in your own language and in a way that really sets you apart and seems different from what other people would do. Something that really is uniquely yours. I wrote an essay about kind of my experience. I'm from Brooklyn, New York. My experience with 9/11 and kind of the way that 9/11 had been used in political discourse since 2001. I wrote it the week before my application was due, while I was working on the Obama campaign. So it felt very personal and had a lot to do with how I was living my life at that time. My other essays I wrote about an experience I'd had volunteering, a semi-religious experience I'd had volunteering at a food shelter one summer, and then I wrote one about a character on my block who lived on my street in Brooklyn. But they were all personal essays and very much about sort of they were much more about who I am and where I'm going from now, what I care about in my life going forward, which I think is kind of the most persuasive thing for colleges to see. They're not about this is what I want to do in my career and these are the great things that I've done in my life, right? Because that's what the rest of the application is about. They're very much about this is what makes Evan Walker Wells or Max Loverear. And I think that more than anything else is probably the biggest common thing that you hear about people's essays for college applications.
It's funny because when you talk about those activities and also about essays like we just talked about, one of the questions I think I also wrote an essay about was talk about one thing you've done that isn't on the resume or that you're submitting their application. I wrote about my very, very serious career playing silly ball, which was a sort of just foolish sport that my dorm at high school played together, and that was a great essay. So maybe that was the most important thing that I did in high school. But also, I worked in the Democratic Club, doing a lot of campaigning and bringing a lot of speakers in. I was, like I mentioned earlier, a member of the Gay Straight Alliance. I was the vice president of the senior class in high school. I played squash, I played tennis, and I think those are the main things.
Yeah, I did a big range of things all through high school. A lot of those were academic in nature. I competed on a traveling math competition team. I was the president of the science club one year. But I also found that there were opportunities that were lacking, and so when that happened, I would sometimes try to create those extracurriculars for myself. So my sophomore year in high school, I started a philosophy club that sort of met weekly to discuss things that we had read. I also I ran cross country all through high school. I participated in some musicals, and I had sort of that full range of experiences, ranging from arts and humanities to sciences and athletics as well.
I did music, I did theater, I did debate stuff, I did poetry. All those were sort of done through the school, right? I did the school newspaper. I ran a tutor volunteering program for local students. I collected, used test prep books from all the kids who were taking the SATs and the SAT2s and the APs and all these things, and brought those over to the same testing place, or this same college prep place. And I worked on the Obama campaign for the summer and fall of 2008, going into my senior year. And those were sort of the big things.
I did 2 different interviews. Two schools, 2 interviews. For Yale, it was actually I think I'm an exception that Yale didn't require an interview for my school for some reason. So I did a very informal talk with someone back, an alumnus of the school back home in Canada, over dinner. I'm not even sure it was an official interview, so I'm an exception there. From North Carolina, I ended up going down, visiting and having an interview at the admissions center, which was sort of it was 30 minutes. They talked about what I was interested in, asked me to talk a little bit more about the essays they already had an application at that point, to talk a little more about the applications to what I'd written about, but again, it was relatively casual, and they sort of wanted to get a better sense of who I was and what interested me.
Yeah, similarly, the interview process at the schools I applied to wasn't actually that big of a deal. I had one pretty informal conversation with a Yale alum like Max, and at least in my case, I was told that the function of the interview could improve your application, but was just sort of an added part and not central to it. And I think it was similar for the other schools that I applied to as well.
I applied to 2 schools. Both schools I had an interview with an admissions officer, which was not required. In either case, I did them while I was doing tours. Someone had told me that was the thing you were supposed to do. And I assume that neither of the interviews hurt, because I ended up getting to both schools. For Yale, I also did an alumnus interview. We got coffee one day in Manhattan and just talked about Yale for a bit.